Hi, I'm Nicolas Forzy, and I'm very glad to be talking to the film scene for the first time. There are two things I'd like to touch upon in the short talk that I'll be giving you now. One is about screenwriting, and the other is about film production. Most of this will be based on experience I've had in writing, producing, directing, and shooting and editing my feature film Ambition back in 2005, and everything else that I've learned in the last decade or so working in production. So touching upon screenwriting first, I think what I'd like to share is a method that I use when I write a story and when I write a script. Generally what I do is I start with a world, and what I mean by world is the environment in which your story is going to be set. Because usually, and that's linked to production, usually the budget constraints will dictate what location, what environment you can use. If you're doing science fiction, obviously you're likely to have a budget that lets you dream a little bit. If you're doing an independent film or a short film, then you're going to use whatever you've got. And then it's good to start with your world and define the rules that apply to everyone in that world, every character and every element of that world. This can be, for example, as simple as day or night. Maybe your world has no day. Or things like what influences that world in terms of, say, gravity or the elements. Or something simple, like, we all have to pay taxes. Maybe in that world, no one pays taxes. That sounds like a really good film to be in. Then, beyond the world's rules, I try to develop dynamics, which are relationships between the various entities in the world. So, for example, if there's someone in charge, if there's someone who has strength and others don't, if there's someone who has powers, others don't. But I stay away from being too specific at that stage. It's just about the dynamics between the different groups. And then I try to put in a few quirks, something a little bit original in there. For example, the idea of having no day and being only a nighttime world. That worked very well for a film like Dark City by Alex Proyas. Or various other things that make your world unique. What that gives you is a world, it's a playground in essence, within which you can start letting your characters roam free. And that's the second step. I then build characters. And the characters, to me, need to be true human beings, and in order to make them human beings you have to spend time with them, and that means imagine what they'd be like outside of your story. How would they interact with normal people? How would they talk to their parents? Do they have parents? How would they talk to their kids? How would they play sports, get dressed in the morning, things like that. Once you get to know this, you get to know them as friends, you get to know them as intimate relationships, and that means you can write them a whole lot better. And most importantly, you can eventually let them drive the story, because that's really what's going to make a story compelling. It's when the characters are doing what makes sense for them, because then your audience is going to relate to them, it's going to understand them, and is going to be able to empathize with them. So what I look for in a character, first of all, is the voice. How do they talk? Of course, for example, I am French, and so if I talk like this, you have a different expression. Then if I adopt the manner of a Southern gentleman of the United States of America, and of course, right, that's not the same as a guy who talks like a Cockney bloke right down the pub. See, all these things made you visualize me in a slightly different way. This is how your characters will behave. If they have a voice of their own, they will be whole entities. And then from there, you try to describe them as something else. Try to describe them as an animal or as a plant, and that will immediately give you a whole set of dimensions about your character. If your character is a bear, you immediately have loads of things that come to your mind when you think about a bear, and so that's going to help you draft your character and shape your character a little bit more. If he's a lion, it's completely different. If he's, I don't know, a mouse, again, very different. And that's going to help you understand how they behave, how they move, and that's important in the way you write them. And then, of course, there's the classic things of understanding their strengths, their weaknesses, their flaws, their urges and their tastes. You gotta give them things. They really like strawberries. It can be something original like that, or they really hate, I don't know, the sound of rain on windows. It freaks them out. Things like that make them a little bit unique. They're allergic to gold, whatever it can be. But give them something that's completely outside of the story. I find that gives them a little bit of an edge, a little bit of a memorable trait. And then once you've got your characters and you've got your world within which those characters are behaving, that's where, for me, I'm ready to shape my story, because I'll know what these characters, these interesting characters, are likely to do in certain circumstances. And let's be straight, the choices a character makes are really what defines them. In terms of story, the way I proceed is very, very methodical and very almost rigid, if you will. I draft out the 10 turning points in a script along the classic hero's quest. So the beginning, which is setting up your world, setting up your story, and then the enticing incident, which prompts the hero into their quest. Then 10 pages later, usually, the refusal of that quest, and then 30 pages in, he embarks on the quest with a particular plan. 40 pages in, fails first, not a big deal, not much at stake. 50 pages in, fails a second time with the same plan, hints at the fact that he can succeed, but is not necessarily doing so in the right way. And then by page 60, point of no return, where the hero goes all in, bets everything he has, believes in his plan, and by page 70 fails abominably and is in the bottom of despair, so that by page 80 you have the angel moment of the redefinition of that plan, the understanding of what went wrong, the growth of the character into something new that gets them to the new plan, which by page 90 to 100 gives them success. That's a recipe. You know, you give the same recipe to different people, they're not going to do the same thing. Some of them are going to do really good, some of them are going to do really bad, some of them are going to add a little bit that's going to make them theirs. Don't be afraid to use recipes. The word formulaic is really negative, but to me, when you look at a recipe, it's very constructive, and that's the way I'd like to go about it. So that's my 2 cents about screenwriting. Talking about production, what I found helpful when I produced Ambition, which was done on a credit card, one of those, for a budget of under $20,000, we shot for 14 days. And to be honest, there were very little compromises. And the way we did that is, first of all, a lot of prep. Spend time prepping, because that is time you're not going to have when you're shooting. And the more you prep, the more you understand up front what kind of problems can arise, and you find solutions for them, the more prepared you're going to be when these problems show up. You don't really have a lot of time to think when you're shooting. And so what you want to do is prep so that you don't have to think when you're shooting, you just have to execute. I really believe in mapping out every aspect of your shoot and every aspect of your story before you begin. Storyboard, if you don't have the skills or the time to storyboard, at least do a shot list so that you break down your script and know for each line how you're going to shoot it and what angle you're going to get. Because then you can plan your day knowing how many camera setups you're going to need. And honestly, on an independent shoot, don't try for more than 15 setups a day. The top we did on one of our shooting days was 42, but that was really crazy, and I don't recommend it. It's best to have more basic shots, but get them done well and focus on the performance than to try to go fancy and screw up your production. A note on that as well is make it easy for you to deliver a better film. A better film is not about fancy camera moves, it's about performance. And so when you're producing, as opposed to directing, make the circumstances of your director and your cast easy so that they can perform and deliver the performance that you're looking for. If you're going to force on budget, tighten the shooting days but increase the prep, because prep is cheaper, and don't try to fix things in post, because that never works. All right? If you don't have it on the day, you're not going to find it in post magically. You're not going to add a little effect or things like that. Get it on the day. In order to get it on the day, plan ahead so that you know you have time to do that. One last thing is something I read in the Guerrilla Bible of Filmmaking, which the Guerrilla Filmmaker's Handbook, a British book that was very helpful in understanding the pitfalls of independent filmmaking. The recommendation there was plan for one money shot every day of shooting. So that if you're shooting for 10 days, you'll have at least 10 money shots. What I mean by money shots are the fancy shots that look great and that are going to elevate your film a little bit. Make sure they don't get in the way of the main shots and of the main sequences, but by all means have fun with that shot so that by the end you end up with 10 great shots, 10 great money shots in your production. I would never put things on a credit card and put off the problem of solving a money issue in production. If there is a money issue, you got to deal with it now, and the best way is to say no. If you're faced with a problem of running out of funds, you got to cut that off real quick as a producer and be harsh and unfortunately accept that it's part of production. At the end of the day, the film will get made, and that's really what counts. And also, be prepared once the film is done to start work all over again, because now you have to market it. And by marketing it, I mean you have to put it out to distributors, who are your audience, before the public, because they're going to be the ones putting the film in front of audiences. So get ready to get out there and pitch your film to distributors. Make yourself available to them. Make their life easy by providing everything that they will need. And believe me, there's a lot they will need. That's called a delivery list. And the deliverables there are things you might not expect, but things like an automatic dialogue sheet, a dialogue cue sheet, sorry. Dialogue cue sheet will need the actual frame, beginning and end of every single line in your film, because they'll use that for dubbing and subtitling purposes. That is part of the deliverables. If you don't provide that, you don't get paid. Plan for these things. Know that you're going to have to spend time doing those, because it's worth it. All of this sounds horrible, and during the time you're going through it, it often is. But at the end of the day, that's how you make movie magic. That's how you tell stories, and that's how you make people believe what you're saying. And you embark them on a journey, and you take them away from reality for a couple of hours, and there's nothing more rewarding than seeing an audience enjoy your film. So what you don't want is to be at the stage where they're watching and you can tell that you could have done a better job. You want to do the best job you can, so that when that audience is in front of the screen and watching your work, you're proud. And that feeling is precious, and it's fantastic, and I really, really wish you the best in finding that, because there's nothing like it out there. It's all about teamwork. You got to work with your screenwriter, your director, your cast. A lot of people are going to help you. Embrace that, accept that, help them in return. It's a two-way street. But at the end of the day, do what you love, you know? So I hope that you guys take something away from what I just told you, and feel free to send me some questions by email or on Facebook. I'm nicolas.forzy.writer on Facebook, since I just recently published my first novel, Alphanumeric, which I encourage you to check out on Amazon. And I'm also reachable on Twitter and Forzy, as well as on Google+, nicolas.forzy, and on Instagram at nforzy. So lots of angles for you to reach me. I wish you the best. I want to thank the film scene again for having me here, and I look forward to seeing the work from all of you very soon.